Hey, and welcome back to the podcast. We're here with Josef Schinwald from Guest Experts on Air. And Josef is the go-to person, in fact, to be speaking to if you want to get your message out there, if you're a book expert, a thought leader, a solopreneur, author, speaker, or brand, and you want to do this guest podcast tour, get yourself booked on world-class podcasts, then Josef is your man. So Josef will be talking us into it and encouraging us and reassuring us and all those other things. So Josef, glad to be speaking with you.
Hey, Robert, it's a real a privilege to be here at your world-class show.
Yes. Cool. We mentioned world-class podcasts. Luckily, I'm one of those, and I'm equally grateful for you to be here. It's a privilege. I take it seriously. That it's easy to discount it. And we were just saying before we started recording that things are much simpler now, right? When you have a guest appearance, when you have a meeting, you don't have to get on a plane. You can just zoom in. And now with podcasting and all the many thousands of shows, you can just find the right audience and schedule all these things. So tell us about it. Tell us what a podcast tour is all about and what sort of service you provide.
Yes, the simplest thing ever. I mean, I have to go there and then I go to the podcast tour and what kind of service I provide. But for everybody, really, for every internet marketer. And, many people might hate it because when you have written a great book or when you do an online course, it's just getting simpler with AI. I'm not an expert in it, but what I just did with you, I go into your LinkedIn and I let ChatGPT AI familiarize yourself with you. And I say the same thing with me, with my website and my writing and my personality. And I say, how do we resonate the best? And it's incredible how quickly you're just right there. And then you can ask things like, how do you resonate the best with Robert's audience? This is getting simpler and simpler, okay? So we have to adjust. Like Charles Darwin said, the ones who actually adapt the first will, they survive really well. So we have to adapt. We can't avoid it, this AI with podcasting. And it's going to be stronger and stronger, but people don't look at the AI, the artificial intelligence output. They look at the human output influenced by the AI. So in other words, your own brain has to become more powerful, and your own heart. I mean, the brain is connected with the heart. If you just see it separately, that's not what people want. And
I
then
agree.
when I go, sorry.
That's okay. I'm agreeing with what you're saying is that it's important to be on the cutting edge. But then also there's that aspect of being able to use the tool and not just it just be some kind of just random thing that you use and work with it. That way it becomes just part of your business and part of what you do.
Yes, because you like to give entrepreneurs the tools and the strategies to be more successful in business. So I have a similar mission in my low spiritual background, basically, which is also to help like thought leaders and entrepreneurs to get their message out. And I like it a lot because I somehow attract really awesome, extraordinary individuals like Wall Street Journal bestsellers, and not only those, but also I like to help people who have it in them. You just need a little bit more positioning because so many people that just like you're an expert in online courses and books and authors, and they have it in them, but they are just not. They want to make it perfect before they think about marketing. And I think it's the opposite. You have to just first think about the marketing. And like Peter Drucker said, he's an Austrian. I'm Austrian myself, so I identify with him. But Peter Drucker, in my generation, we know him all because he wrote immense great literature books on management. And I was a hemisphere manager of a newspaper, so I read all of them, and I was in university. So he said the first most important thing in a business is to create a customer. And so the next most important thing is to know and understand that marketing is an investment, and everything else, all activities in your business are an expense. So a lot of people will not agree to this. That's why I used him, because you don't have to disagree with me. It's just his theory, but he knows it from a lot of experience and from this incredible success he had as an author, as a spiritual thought leader. So ultimately, I think it's true. And so we have to focus on first foremost on how do we market this, what we want to sell. And there are more stories to it, but like how Bill Gates started this and all this. And I was lucky to actually be several times on television in Latin America talking about these paradigm changes, like Bill Gates, who was in an expo, and just to say it in a second now, and would have look at the other tables and you see VC Corp. And VC Corp was a company which already had Windows, and he didn't have Windows. So he was the next 2 years, and after 2 years, there was another expo, computer expo. I don't know exactly now the name of it, but he would have a computer set up with dummies where you could click on those window icons, but they didn't do anything yet. But he was determined because he saw the marketing value of charging the right price, selling it the right way, because this VC Corp company, they sold one application for $1,000. That was for most people too expensive. And yeah, so I just wanted to say how important marketing. So I love with podcast guesting, and it's particularly for solopreneurs. I love the aspect of getting your message out and having the opportunity to talk about your branding story. And you don't have that with traditional advertising so much, because you can talk 45 minutes. So if you have a real framework, and a real deep expertise, and you are funny, and you are like, you don't have to be funny. You can be an introvert. It doesn't really matter, as long as you are like, you're going into your expertise, because your expertise is a unique reference point. Not everybody has it. You bring unique value to the table of discussions, and it's a great marketing channel. It's not the one solution to all your marketing problems, but it's a nice additional thing.
Something that you can continuously work on. And so I like your thought process here, that many people have that perfectionism, and they think that their message and everything has to be 100% right, and then they go and market it, but then the recipe for that leads to the VisiCorp problem of like, you made all these assumptions and you did all these things that maybe don't exactly line up with what people want. And you're saying that the solution is to be more like Bill Gates and to kind of see what's already out there and do a better job, but then also put it out imperfectly, and then way you can refine it. And I'm kind of hearing a lot of that in kind of like the stories that you tell, right? And it seems like podcasting is all about stories. You have these things that you want to say, but it's not just a list. It's not how to. You just try out different stories. You try out different material, and you hear about like stand-up comedians doing this, right? They will have like a set of jokes, and they'll just go around the country and they'll see what jokes work and which ones don't, and like tape recorded and then refine the jokes. And I was even the other day reading about like the late night talk shows here in America, where they're like 5 days a week, and they'll have like 130 jokes, and they'll like work on it in the morning, and then in the early afternoon they'll like have a whole audience to run through this whole show of 130 jokes, and then like refine them and test them out. And so I imagine that this sort of thought process is the same with podcasting, right? Is jump into it imperfectly. And in fact, if you're unsure, that's even a good thing. But then the more shows that you guest on, the more this message will be refined, and then it'll just get easier and more fun and more profitable over time.
That is so true. That is so true, Robert. I remember when I was the first time on a television set, there was 3 cameras on me, and I never took LSD, but I read books from Ram Dass when he took it. And it was very similar when you sit at a sofa, and you see yourself from above, and then you don't see yourself at all anymore. It's like in the beginning, right? When you get interviewed on television. And so you have to just do it. A lot of people are really afraid, and they say, the scientific studies, I have no idea, no sources, but they say that, that's why I say they, it's not very scientific, or the way I say it, they present it now, but that the fear of public speaking is bigger than the fear of dying for some.
Yes.
And, I did have experienced it also several times in my life. I was a tourist guide in Austria on a fortress. And I remember the first time I stood in front of 100 people, I just lost my voice, and I could just tell the next person next to me with a big key, because in the fortress, everything was a big key to open it with a big key. Just follow me, I could say that, just follow me. And when they followed me, I could recover my voice. But it's like that thing. And when I'm on a Zoom interview with my prospects, and it's always like they're so brilliant. They're so brilliant, and they mostly do it. But it's really that it's not like that first thing what they have to overcome is always like I will have to do it. I will have to actually be in a free fall scenario where I can't hold on to anything, where somebody will ask me a question and I will, but you can't, because you have like, coming back to your example about comedians, and they have so many jokes as a reservoir. You also have a reservoir of your own expertise, because you can bring it from this angle and that angle and the other one, and you can always relate it to where you want it to. And if the podcast host, and most of them in the good world-class podcasts like yours, which is top level, because I know I researched them, they ask you pointed questions. So you can actually record it, and you will have on your social media platforms always a different angle, a different way, a different presentation of your own expertise. You will see it's always different, because the way you get asked by intelligent people, other intelligent people, you will answer differently, and it brings new content. So it's a wonderful content strategy, because somebody can chop it up, those interviews, one interview, into one video clips, and with several interviews with the podcast doer, you'll have like content marketing material for years to come. And I see it done by my own clients. And it's fascinating. They use the interviews I've booked them on, they use them not over and over again. They have so much material, they use them, those little clips where they said something really wise with regard to their authority and with regard to their expertise. And then their audience, and on social media, this is often misunderstood, they are not the listeners of podcasts usually. They are just there for other reasons. But when they see a 1 minute video clip, it's great. They see you more and more as the go-to expert, as the authority of the subject matter, because why are you always interviewed? And that's also like a myth. People think that you get invited. But ultimately, you get invited if you're a famous university professor and they invite 5 people at a discussion of a particular, do the Neanderthals really come from Austria? You need those experts. But usually, even you're the most famous person in the world, many times, you have to have someone to pitch you, or you do it yourself. And then the audience on the social media, or wherever you have been following, like in your marketing system, ecosystem of profitability, in your email list, they will perceive it as you have been invited, because you are already the expert. So it's for businesses great, for branding, because it takes time to actually brand yourself. You can just do it with a little picture on Facebook advertising. And it's good, particularly good for thought leaders, coaches, everybody, solopreneurs. And solopreneurs are not only like a one-man show. Sometimes they have 10 people, but they're still solopreneurs, because it depends all on them.
Wonderful. And so my brain is trying to digest all this helpful information you said. So you said that it's like sometimes like the magic happens when you show up on a podcast, right? You get this thing scheduled, you send your bio, you have these kind of questions, but different hosts will ask different questions or ask them in a different way, and then you will answer in a different way, and it will probably be more interesting and exciting than if you just like took out your phone and started recording something, right? Just because you were kind of there in the moment. And then this leads to these video clips that you can pull out and use for years to come, and use to reach this new audience of social media browsers who are not podcast listeners, the more of the short attention span, but these little clips will then get to them anyway. We'll get the information there. And then and so this is a thing that your podcast guests should use for many years to come, and to make use of it. And so what sorts of objections do these, you mentioned that sometimes you talk on these calls with prospects, right? So what sort of objections do they have as far as like the excuses for why they say they can't do it? Do they say that they're too nervous, they don't know the process, they don't know the technical details? Like, why don't more people do this? Or why do they hesitate to take action on this?
Well, Robert, it's probably the same. Like sometimes with your clients when they write a book or when they decide to make an e-commerce store or many other services you offer. But that was catching my eyes because it's very similar. If you have clients for this product or services, then it's similar for podcast guesting. It's mainly that, I don't know what it is, introvertedness, extrovertedness. The introvert, most of us, the leaders, are introverts. That's like a study. Again, I don't know the sources, but CEOs are most of the time introverts. It's just because we get our sources from the inside out. We get the energy, we retract, we go back to ourselves. So we are perfectionists many times. We think that it will sell. We start with a good price for a product. We start with all this, and then we don't understand how people really are. It's like the myth versus the reality. So let's say compared to the podcasting world, like if you sell something like for $2,000 right away because you worked 5 years on it, and that online course is perfect, and you want to sell it now, and then you get only 7 clients. Whereas the guy next to you, he did it for a $7 ebook, and then he sold to the video version for $99, and then he had another ebook. And then he upsold it for another, and then he got the masterclass, and he's already rich, So in podcast guesting, it's very similar. I mean, you just have to start jumping into it because you get a lot of audience. People miscalculate this. When you are leveraging with your first podcast, you just get started. You have a product, you have an expertise, but you get started, you're going to learn so much doing it. And then those audiences, they accumulate. So if you can't afford it, because, a podcast tour might cost you, let's say I start, if I may already say this, I start with a lower price. I have a four interview thing for $699, I think, $700. And then I go to 10 interview packages. That is too expensive for you. You can actually do it yourself. It just takes a little bit of a discipline, and you have to just really follow one simple rule. Just like in a conversation, you want to get to know the other person first. You want to listen first. So you want to listen to the podcast. You want to write an Apple review, and then you want to say why you think that you're a great expert and a great fit to the podcast. So what is your contribution to the audience? Why would that podcast host be interested in you? And so forth. And keep it really humble and not bitching anything, and just make it that the podcast host says, well, this is really nice. I want that person on my podcast. So understanding this takes some time. It takes some research. It takes some discipline. But if you can afford it, go to a podcast booking agency. And there are many. They are cheaper than me. But it's like, but you want to get really good podcasts right away. And you say you have 3 podcasts a month, and you have maybe then, if you multiply it with 50, you have you have a certain great amount of podcasts in a year. And if that is a return on investment, and you get it from your first 3 months, after 3 months, you get a return on investment. You get new people buying your coaching services. You get new people in your online course. Whatever it is, some people just want to they sell their books and make it a bestseller, a New York Times bestseller, Wall Street Journal bestseller, whatever it is. But whatever your goal is with the podcast booking, guesting tour, make sure that you test it out, that you actually start doing it, because it might be the best marketing strategy in your arsenal.
I agree. And I think it is. When you consider you show up for a 20, 30, 40-minute podcast interview, what can you really do in 30 minutes tweaking your SEO? Or what can you do in 30 minutes playing around with Facebook ads versus this guest appearance that will pay off in so many ways and that will use the other person's traffic? And now you've kind of made a new connection, made a new friend. And so you've been saying some of these things like, okay, being booked on podcasts, everyone assumes that they just come to you, but what you must do is prospect yourself out to these different shows, and to find the right fit and demonstrate value, leave an Apple review, listen to one of their shows, and then try to find sort of the overlap or the complement, right? And find where, well, their show was about this, and I can provide this perspective as a guest on that. So then here's where those two things meet. And so as far as the things needed to get on a podcast. Some people say like, oh, you might need like a book to be on a podcast, or might need like a speaker sheet. What do you need? Like, it's just as a bio and some questions enough just to get started, get the evidence, get the data, and then even try with 3 interviews a month? Like, what would you say are the prerequisites for being on podcasts?
Yeah, I'm thinking, and what I do is, my experience is that I don't use like one sheets, because when everybody does something, I stay away from it. I mean, your email has to be already really good enough. Like, you get a nice subject line from your topics you can talk about. You ask, certain tools. You like ChatGPT. If you don't use it now, you are way behind on everything. So you ask it, give me a few split tests for another 5 subject lines, whatever, right? But I also do something which is actually right now a book about it. And it's just one problem where I solve one problem for a certain group, which are coaches. And that is how to research the right podcast. So if you have the right podcasts, the interview-based, where people have been on like you, like similar experts, right? And you get them actually pretty fast if you know how to do it. Then you have to find a way to make that icebreaker with those podcasts. And you do it, you systemize it, you have to follow up, and you do it every month for the whole year. And you don't need to take more than 3 hours a month to get 3 interviews. But that's what I explain more in my book. It will only cost $7. But I just say, I'm writing it now on my website. It will be there in a few weeks. And then this will lead to do more of this value producing thing for me. But I have that. This is my blueprint. This is the way I do it. And I do it very successfully already for over 4 years with top level experts. But as I said, I want to give it away, because I feel also that a lot of coaches who don't want to do it with an agency, they can actually do it for themselves. And that's basically my idea.
Amazing. Well, you practice what you preach, right? Of taking that massive imperfect action, and of not waiting for all the different things to be in place. Like, for example, the book, you said, I have the website, I have the service, I have this experience, I have this knowledge, and I'll just be I'll get on podcasts regardless. And I also like what you said there of don't let all the things like a speaker sheet get in the way. Just have a bio and use ChatGPT if you know how to do that. And I also am making a little mental note of, that's a really cool tip you threw in there of having ChatGPT give you some split tests, give you some variations on your own podcast pitch. That way you can just kind of try out the different material and see what works. So this has been a very fun and encouraging conversation here, Josef. You've got me motivated to go out there and get some podcast guest appearances. Like, for some reason, I have this show, and I think you're like episode number like 991. We only have 1,000 episodes, so I have like the full calendar of guests. But going and being on shows, I just have a problem kind of getting that momentum going. And you say the answer is just do it. Don't overthink it, and just like block out the time and say, if you want to be on 3 shows, then block out 3 months or 3 hours out of the month. And then if even that's not working or that's frustrating, then contact and use a guest booking agency such as yourself, such as guestexpertsonair.com. And so tell me about that. Tell me about what sort of like offer you have. What's the next step here? What's the call to action as far as the things that you can do for our audience now that they've learned some things from you?
Yes, so do this for 3 hours a month. You get 3 interviews. You add it up for the whole year. You're leveraging audiences. You reach hundreds of thousands of people in your niche. Okay. Well, guest experts in there is for those who say, I don't have the time to do the research or to pitch. I want to be presented by somebody who does that really professionally. That is expertsonair.com. So we offer a Zoom call first, a strategy session. I like to help people who already accomplished. I like to help people who have something interesting, and they might not even have a website, but I can help them with podcast guesting, and they slowly progress towards success and towards audience. We all need traffic. I mean, you know this better than anybody else, Robert. You're an expert in this. We know traffic. We can pay for it, or we get it with podcast guesting, and we pay for it also because somebody has work. Either you do it yourself, or you say the heavy lifting I leave up to Josef Schinwald with his assistants, whatever. But the point is, we need traffic. We cannot have a business. Like Drucker said, you need marketing. You need the first thing of a business. The first purpose is to create a customer. So yes, so that is basically what we do. We offer the strategy session. I will be with you on the phone. You will see it on the website. And then to make it short now, I sell 10 podcasts, and they are being renewed for $2,100. It's about $200 per podcast, and I only offer like the highest level podcast because that's what I do. I love the average ones, I love the beginners and all this, but they are more for other services like podcast matching services. I like to start right away for everybody. This is 3% to 0.50, 0.1%. The global rank, they have the most audiences. And then before somebody actually commits to 10 interviews, I actually offer I'll offer a 3 interview podcast experience. And for a limited time, each time I put in another interview. So for 4 interviews, for only $6.99, you get like some great audience and you will have a wonderful experience. So that's what I do.
I love it. And so if you're out there in podcast land, if you know that you need to do the marketing, like Peter Drucker said, the marketing is the investment, everything else is the expense. And so if you need to do this marketing, but you've been frustrated and not really getting any traction and momentum, then do the podcast guesting and have Josef help you do it. And if you find yourself frustrated or it's so time consuming or just can't stick with it, it's because you don't have a dedicated team like Josef to go to his existing contacts and research new podcasts for you and work his magic, work his system and get you booked on some of these podcasts. That way you can have fun demonstrating this knowledge that you have, and that way you can rise above being the best kept secret. Because like Josef said, you interview all sorts of experts who are like just really skilled and really specialized, and they have this really interesting things to say, but because they just they don't have access to the audience, they're really missing out. And so you need to go to guestexpertsonair.com and look at those packages Josef has for you and get that call booked and see what makes sense as far as just getting your message out there, because life is short and it's way too easy to just sit there and wonder, like, why don't people notice me? Because you have not been proactive with your marketing. And so as we're wrapping up our conversation here, Josef, because it's a podcast, we want to be action packed. It's always fun to end on an interesting quote, moral, or lesson. So does anything come to mind to you as far as a powerful, fun, helpful quote, moral, or lesson? What do you have?
Well, I would say, can I repeat the one Peter Drucker said? It's
Yes.
Again, marketing, when you do anything in marketing, measure it. What isn't measured, it's not being done. How do you measure it? Well, and that's what he said, the quote is basically the first, and I just want to say that because it's so important. The purpose of a business is to create a customer. Because in all my conversations, when people get this right, they make money. When they don't get it right, they are too much introverted. They're too much thinking about perfection and perfecting their course and perfecting their book and all this, but that doesn't make you money, and then you give up. I worked 2 years on, but we're wrapping up. So I just want to say thank you so much, Robert. That's what I want to say. Everybody should really try to do their best after they get interviewed with the podcast host, because you guys are such nice people. You are helping others to get their message out, and I do what I preach. So being on your show was just wonderful. And I connected with you on LinkedIn now. I'll help you in any way possible. I'm there for you. I'm your friend. That's what you also have to do when you're on a podcast show. Because don't say, okay, now I'm being interviewed, I said it, okay, goodbye. No, don't do it. It's really great to make these connections with the podcast hosts. They're wonderful people.
And you're a wonderful person as well. And these are good lessons to follow up and to have that reminder that us podcast hosts, we want guests. We like guests. We want to encourage you in everything that you do. And it's not scary. We're not going to go to battle. It's going to be a fun time. And so that's a good, like I said, Josef, like I'm on some shows every now and then, but I need to be more deliberate and be more habitual and measure it and see the results. And so that's kind of a reminder I'm putting in my own head that like I enjoy pretty much any kind of podcast guest there is. So I need to tell myself that as a podcast guest, they want me to be their as well. So it is time to do some of that measurement. It is time to do that podcast guesting. Just do it. Don't let your perfectionist introvert brain talk yourself out of it. And the logical next step to make that happen is go to guestexpertsonair.com and check out Joseph's website and get yourself booked on podcasts. And thank you so much, Joseph, for being here, being a lot of fun, being authentic. I appreciate you so much.
Thank you, Robert. It's really a privilege. I send you a podcast. When I see one, I'm going to send you one to be interviewed. And your niche.
That's very generous.
I want to return your favor.
So I will have to accept that when you send that.
For inviting me. Yes, thank you very much.
Wonderful. Thank you. Very helpful.